What is up, guys? We made it to week one of college football, and we got a little bit of an appetizer last weekend, but this weekend is the real deal. We have games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even on Monday, and we're going to break them all down. But before we get into those games, I want to talk about a few games that I don't really plan to get too much in depth with. So, first off, give me Nebraska over Cincinnati on Thursday. I think Nebraska is going to show that they're the real deal here. I have a lot of faith in what Matt Rule is building there, and I think that this could be a big year for them. While Cincinnati is still pretty much figuring out their identity, I think Nebraska is going to win this game and cover the points, which is set at about a touchdown right now. Moving on, I think Tulane will beat Northwestern. I think Northwestern will be a better team than they were last season, but I think Tulane is one of the best teams that G5 has to offer, and I think they're going to be able to pull this win off against one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. I think Oregon State's going to be able to beat a Cal team that lost all of its major weapons, and I think Utah is going to win a close one over UCLA. I'm high on UCLA this year, but I think that Utah has the advantage early in the season, but watch out for Nico, though. He should be really good. Okay, now let's break down some games that I think are really worth talking about, starting with Auburn at Baylor. This is a game that I guarantee is flying under most people's radars, but it really shouldn't be. It might be quietly one of the most important games of week one. It's not just a good game, it's a tone setter for both programs. For Baylor, it's a prove-it year. They believe they have the roster to compete for the Big 12 and maybe even sneak into the playoffs. For Auburn, the ceiling isn't quite that high, but a win here on the road under the lights could prove that Hugh Freeze is moving this program in the right direction and quickly. So let's talk about matchups. On paper, Auburn has the more talented roster by far. They've got a lot of weapons like Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, who are absolute problems on the outside. And their offensive line is the best it's been in years. And even without Jarquez Hunter, they should be able to run the ball pretty efficiently. And if they can't establish that run game, that'll take a lot of pressure off of their biggest wild card, which is their quarterback, Jackson Arnold, who transferred in from Oklahoma. And listen, I love his upside. He's got arm talent, mobility, and flashes of big play potential. But last year, he was a turnover machine. He did not protect the football, plain and simple. Maybe that was the fault of Oklahoma's offensive line, maybe not, but he's going to be going up against a Dave Aranda defense, and if you know anything about Dave Aranda, you know he is a defensive genius. And if Arnold starts throwing balls into tight windows and making late decisions, Baylor's defense will be able to capitalize and flip this game on its head. On Baylor's side, they don't have the flashiest roster, but they do have something just as important, which is continuity and confidence. Their quarterback, quietly one of the most efficient returners in the conference. Two solid backs returning, and down the stretch last season, they were really good. They found their groove on offense. Momentum really matters here, especially in week one when the other side is still trying to figure out who they are. Defensively, Baylor wasn't that great last season. They didn't look like the classic Dave Aranda unit, but when you have a coach that's this smart on that side of the ball, I trust the scheme to be able to round them back into form, especially in high-stakes openers like this one. Oh, and don't sleep on special teams either. Baylor might have the best returner in the country. They can score on kickoffs, punts. Auburn can't even consistently hit field goals. That means that Auburn has to finish in the red zone. Field goals won't cut it, and with a turnover-prone quarterback and a new-look offense, that's a tough task in such a hostile environment. At the end of the day, this is not just about talent, it's about trust. And I trust Baylor to protect the ball. I trust Aranda to have a plan to rattle Jackson Arnold. I trust Baylor's offense to build on last season's growth. And I trust their special teams to swing field position. Auburn might have the best roster since Freeze arrived, but until they prove that they can't execute at their talent level, especially with such a risky quarterback, I can't pick them in a spot like this. So that's why my pick is Baylor. It's at home, it's at night, and it's against a quarterback with a turnover history. So give me Baylor. This is a prove-it game for both sides, and I trust the Bears to be the team that delivers. Moving on to our Friday night game where Georgia Tech is going to head to Boulder, Colorado to take on the Buffaloes. Right now, the Yellow Jackets are favored by 4.5 points on the road, so let's break that down. And I'm not going to dance around it. The big question heading into this game is, can Colorado score without Shedeur Sanders and without Travis Hunter? The offense last year was built entirely around those two players, and now they're gone. And it's fair to ask, what does this team even look like? Well, I do like their new quarterback in Caden Salter. He's a legit dual threat. He's got arm talent, and he can run. And the skill position players for Colorado aren't all that bad either. Honestly, I think Colorado might look like a more cohesive offense than they were last year, weirdly, because it won't just be the Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter show. But let's not ignore reality. This team is starting fresh at the most important positions, and it's going up against a Georgia Tech defense that, while not elite, is stable and very experienced. Colorado might move the ball, especially since Georgia Tech hasn't consistently generated a pass rush or forced a lot of turnovers. But even if Colorado puts up points, I still don't trust them to win this game because the real mismatch is on the other side of the ball. Georgia Tech returns Haynes King at quarterback. He's an experienced dual-threat quarterback that is comfortable in Brent Key's system. They have Jamal Haynes, who's one of the best running backs in the country, and a veteran offensive line with real continuity. Yes, they lost their top wideout in Eric Singleton, but they still have enough playmakers to keep them humming on offense. Now, line that up against Colorado's defense, which is bigger and deeper than last year, no question, but let's be honest, we haven't seen them stop anyone yet. They might eventually be a solid group, but early in the season, with so many new faces, it's a tough ask, especially against a Georgia Tech team that knows exactly what it wants to be on offense. I think Georgia Tech will control the line of scrimmage, run the ball well, and pick apart a defense that is still trying to figure out its identity. Bottom line, I trust Brent Key's program more right now. Georgia Tech has a better offensive line, a more stable quarterback, and a clear offensive identity, and more returning production across the board. Colorado, they are a storyline. They've got upside, but this is a team that is still rebuilding and still figuring things out. Could Caden Salter ball out and make it interesting? Absolutely. But Georgia Tech is farther along, and when you go on the road and are still favored by nearly 5 points, that tells you Vegas sees the gap. So obviously my pick here is Georgia Tech. I like them to go in here and handle business. I think Colorado will show flashes, but the growing pains are real, especially in week one. Georgia Tech is more ready, more physical, and more complete, and I expect them to prove it here. Moving on to Tennessee versus Syracuse, and it's going to be all orange in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on the first Saturday of the season because Tennessee and Syracuse are set to square off in Atlanta. Two new-look teams, two programs that are in transition, and one really interesting litmus test to kick off this year. First off, let's address the question on every Vols fan's mind. What does Tennessee look like without Nico Iamaleava? That's a very fair concern. Nico was supposed to be the guy, and without him, there are some real unknowns at quarterback. But here's where I land on it. Even with those questions, Tennessee is still an SEC program, and they're going up against what I consider a middle-of-the-pack ACC team in Syracuse. That absolutely matters because talent, depth, physicality, and recruiting level lean all orange, the Tennessee one. Now let's talk about Syracuse and why I'm not quite buying them in week one. Yes, I love Fran Brown and what he's building. He's a rising star in the coaching position, and he way overachieved last year. But they are replacing over 60% of their offensive production, and that's a huge problem here. No more Kyle McCord sitting around, no more Pena making plays, and this team, will likely need a few weeks to figure out who they are on offense. They may get there eventually, but in week one in a fast physical game against an SEC defense, that's a really tough ask. And here's where I think the game's really going to be decided. Tennessee's defense, while not elite, is still talented across the field. They are big up front, they have SEC speed, and in a matchup like this where Syracuse might still be trying to figure out who their go-to guys are, I like Tennessee's front seven to dominate. I don't think Syracuse will be able to move the ball consistently, and I definitely don't think they'll be able to air it out the way they did last year. And when you can't stretch the field and you can't run the ball, it's going to be a struggle. Look, I have questions about Tennessee too. The offense is reloading, and I'm not really sure this is the 9 or 10 win team that fans are hoping for. But they are just too talented for the Syracuse team. In week one, with more continuity and more physicality and a big stage in Atlanta, I just trust them to beat a Syracuse team that's rebuilding on offense and still figuring things out. So I'm picking Tennessee. I think they will take care of business, start fast, and maybe even get a little too confident coming out on this one. Fran Brown's squad might be a tough out later in the season, but not here, not now. Give me Tennessee. And now probably the game most people are waiting to hear about, Texas versus Ohio State. It's kind of insane that we're getting this matchup in week one. I don't really need to hype it up. It speaks for itself. I mean, week one, Columbus, Texas versus Ohio State. It has everything you want. It's a number 1 versus number 3 matchup. Blue Bloods, playoff rematch, 5 stars everywhere, and the potential to shape the national championship picture before the leaves even turn colors. So let's start with the most important position, quarterback. Both teams are turning the page and handing the keys to 5-star quarterbacks. Arch Manning for Texas and Julian Sand for the Buckeyes. And while both are insanely talented, I'm giving the edge to Texas here. Arch has been in the system longer. He stuck with the Longhorns through all the noise, and he looks sharp in limited reps, and I trust him to be able to be a little bit more poised and a little bit more polished out of the gate. Sand's ceiling is just as high, maybe even higher, but with Texas bringing back more continuity around their quarterback, I expect fewer mistakes from Arch in week one. This is one of those subtle advantages that show up in big games early in the season. Texas retained most of its staff, while Ohio State lost both their offensive and defensive coordinator after last year's title run, and now Ryan Day has proven that he can plug in top-tier assistants, but don't underestimate how much continuity helps early, especially with a new quarterback under center. Texas has that, and it matters. But let's be clear, Ohio State may have the two best players in college football on opposite sides of the ball. Caleb Downs on defense and Jeremiah Smith on offense. Those two could flip this game on its head. Throw in home field advantage at the Horseshoe, and you've got every reason to believe this could go Ohio State's way. But would you rather have the two best players in the country or 5 of the top 10, but just not 1 and 2? Because that's what Texas has. But here's where I think it gets real. Ohio State's O-line versus Texas front 7. The Buckeyes' run game will not be what it was last year, and they're still working out O-line cohesion. If they can't keep staying clean, this could get ugly fast. The second matchup I think is really important in this game is Texas' secondary versus Ohio State's wide receivers. You know Jeremiah Smith is going to draw some attention, but the Buckeyes have multiple other weapons. And if Texas can slow them down with a secondary that's solid but not elite, that swings it big time. This one is razor close. Both teams are loaded. Both have national title potential, but right now, in week 1, new quarterback, new staff, big stage, I trust the more stable program. Texas has a returning staff, a quarterback who's been in the system longer, an O-line I trust more, and a run game that can help manage the pressure. Texas is the more ready-made product coming into this one, and that's why I'm picking them to go into Columbus and pull off the biggest win of week 1. Next, let's talk about Alabama at Florida State. And most people are calling it early. Alabama wins next, but I'm telling you, right now, this game is way sneakier than people think. Alabama is favored by nearly 2 touchdowns, but Florida State might just be setting up a trapdoor with new life, new coaches, and a chance to shock the world in week 1. So let's dive into it. Yes, Florida State was a disaster last year, but you can't judge this 2025 squad off of that record. They quietly reloaded in a massive way, and I'm not just talking about talent. I'm talking about infrastructure. Gus Malzahn at OC, Tony White at DC. This is an elite coordinator duo that immediately raises the ceiling of this team. Malzahn gives tempo, creativity, and experience, while White gives them flexibility and pressure on defense. It's a brand new Florida State team, not just a year older, but completely different operationally. Alabama is starting a new quarterback in Ty Simpson, and while the talent is there, he is unproven. Meanwhile, Florida State has Castellanos, who is a dual-threat quarterback with real juice. He's not perfect, but compared to DJU last year, it's a huge upgrade. He can keep defenses honest and give Malzahn a true playmaker to build around. The biggest question here is, can FSU survive in the trenches? Because let's be honest, Alabama has the advantage up front. If the Tide can dominate at the line of scrimmage, especially in the run game, this game might not even be close. They've got bodies, they've got the system, and they've got a nasty ground attack that can eat clock, wear you down, and take the crowd out of it. But if Florida State can clog the run and force Ty Simpson to beat them through the air, now it gets really interesting because Florida State secondary is sneaky good, and White's pressure packages could cause serious issues for a young quarterback still getting comfortable. So here are the major matchups for me. Alabama's O-line versus Florida State's front 7. Can Florida State hold up in the trenches? That's the entire game. The other one, Florida State's offense versus Bama's front. Alabama's defense is going to test timing and chemistry of this new-look FSU offense, but Malzahn is a quick strike style guy who can neutralize the pass rush early. So my pick here is going to surprise a lot of people. I'm going to go out on a limb and go with my gut. Maybe it's the matchups. Maybe, I'm just completely biased, but I have to go with a weird feeling about this one. I'd rather go with my gut and it be wrong than not go with my gut and regret it. So I'm picking Florida State at home. They got elite coordinators. They've got a quarterback who can make plays, and Alabama is still figuring things out. At the very least, I think Florida State will be able to cover the spread, which, like I said, is at 2 touchdowns. But I'm going to do more than that. I am picking the upset. So maybe they win, and I look like a genius. That's what I'm hoping for. Let's move on to LSU versus Clemson. And if you want Blue Bloods and you want heavyweight matchups, this is the one for you. How about the number 1 team in the SEC versus the number 1 team in the ACC, at least for my money this year at least. It's LSU versus Clemson. It's Tiger versus Tiger. It's absolute war. Normally, in these kind of showdowns, I default to the more experienced quarterback. But here, no dice. LSU's got a veteran quarterback, and Clemson's got a veteran quarterback. Both are battle-tested, and both are very capable. This is not a game that I think is going to be decided by quarterback advantage because, in my mind, they cancel each other out. So where do we look next? The first place we should look, I think, is at home field advantage because this game is being played at Clemson, and you better believe that's going to matter in week 1. Death Valley, the Clemson one, is going to be electric. And for an LSU team that has been historically sluggish in early season games, this is a serious hurdle. Remember last year? Remember the year before that? LSU has not made a habit of starting fast under Brian Kelly. Key number 2, I think, is continuity. That's probably the biggest one, actually, and I think it gets overlooked. Clemson brings back a ton of production, not just players, but coaches, systems, schemes, roles. They know who they are. They know what they want to do, and they're bought in. And early in the season, that kind of continuity will win you games, even against teams with more hype. But let's not get it twisted. I love this LSU team. They're number one in my SEC power rankings for a reason. They've got firepower, they've got depth, and they're going to be a force mid-season. But I just don't trust them to come into Clemson week one against the veteran team with cohesion and clarity and come out with a win. My prediction is that Clemson wins in a very gritty opener. It's not going to be a blowout. There's two elite teams going toe-to-toe, but when it comes down to home field advantage, early season continuity, and proven coaching, Clemson has the edge, and I expect them to have a more ready-made product in week one. So give me Clemson. Now let's talk about Notre Dame at Miami. And it's no secret that I did not buy the hype for Miami last year because they won way too many games off the back of questionable ref calls. And unless something nefarious is going on, I don't expect them to be able to rely on that again. And they also can't rely on Cam Ward, Xavier Estepo, or some of the other high-powered weapons they had on offense, which means defense is going to have to be a whole lot better for them to have a shot in games. And I think that's a lot to ask, especially early in the season against the team that just played for a national championship. Now, I wasn't super high on Notre Dame either, but I sure as heck trust them more than this Miami team. I also just don't trust quarterback play at Miami, not because Carson Beck can't ball, but because I'm not convinced that he's healthy enough to be a difference maker, and it's not like he can fall back on running the ball if he isn't 100% with his arm. To be fair, I'm not sure what quarterback play at Notre Dame will look like either, but I trust the run game and I trust the battle-tested defense. I also trust their returning production holistically, even if I don't trust their quarterback. And the game is at Miami, but we know that doesn't give them too much of an edge because their fans just don't show up to their games. But I'm not going to write Miami off. If Carson Beck is healthy and Miami can establish that run game and the defense makes a huge leap, then Miami can absolutely win this game, but I don't think that's going to happen, so give me the Irish in this one. Let's move on now to Virginia Tech at South Carolina. And South Carolina shocked a lot of people last season. They were a fringe playoff team despite being picked as one of the worst teams in the conference last season. But they had a secret weapon in Lenore Sellers that exploded onto the scene, and dare I say, he should be even better this year. I'm talking put the team on his back kind of guy and maybe even a Heisman candidate kind of guy. And in an early game like this, quarterback play is huge, and South Carolina has that edge along with home field advantage. There are still some glaring red flags for me after they lost their best running back, along with a myriad of other guys that produced last year, including some wide receivers. This team definitely still has some holes. For Virginia Tech, it's pretty much a similar story. They have a quarterback with high upside, but he is a bit more turnover prone, and they also lost a lot of returning production. Honestly, both of these teams feel like they're in a very similar spot. They have plenty of talent, plenty of question marks, but you could still see them overachieving and shocking their conference. In this game, it really comes down to my trust that the SEC is a better conference than the ACC, trust that South Carolina has more talent, and trust that Lenore Sellers is the better quarterback, and also trust that home atmosphere will play a factor in this game. Give me the Gamecocks. And last but certainly not least, TCU at North Carolina. And this is Bill Belichick's first game at Chapel Hill, and this is where we will find out what this experiment is going to look like. TCU is coming in, and they bring in Josh Hoover, who absolutely aired the ball out last season and did it effectively. It doesn't matter that the secondary is the strength of UNC's defense. Hoover will be able to get his. The question is, can North Carolina keep up? Because TCU has some vulnerabilities to exploit for sure, and Gio Lopez is a guy that I think could perform really well, especially against a vulnerable TCU secondary. But I think that this game may end up being a bit of a shootout, which would be a ton of fun, obviously, but I got to pick a quarterback and a coach that I trust more here, and that's the Horned Frogs. I know Bill is a legend in the NFL, but I haven't seen him do it at the college level, and I just don't think that NFL experience is going to transfer over as well as people think. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you guys enjoyed. So yeah, peace.